The Alpha King laughed at the clock girl until she his life counting down. Inside her hands Clara Vance had touched 1,000 broken clocks before this one. None of them had ever made a king fall to his knees. The renewal ceremony filled the royal hall with gold light and reverent murmurs. Nobles gathered to witness what they called the 10th year of an eternal reign. Alpha King Cale Draven stood at the center of it, unchanged, unaged, exactly as he had looked a decade ago. Clara had been summoned only to repair an old ceremonial clock mounted behind the throne, dragged in through a side door meant for servants. Careful. Lady Sorrel's voice carried just far enough to be heard. Lower clocks leave rust on royal time. Cale barely glanced at her. Let her fix the clock and leave. I have no use for hands that only touch broken things. Clara said nothing. She knelt before the towering clock and opened its face, expecting gears, springs, the ordinary machinery of time. Instead, she found a strand of a child's silver hair, a scrap of burned contract paper, and a small hourglass pulsing with golden light, beating like something alive. She reached out and touched it. Heat surged up through her fingers into her chest. Lines of gold spread across her skin. 1 year, 2 years, 10, 20, all of them flowing toward a single name she did not need to be told. Cale Draven. In the middle of the hall, the Alpha King's knees buckled without warning. For the first time in 10 years, a single streak of silver appeared in his dark hair. The court gasped as one. Do not touch that clock. Grand Horologist Malric Thorne's voice cracked across the chamber like a whip. Clara looked down at the hourglass trembling in her palm, then up at the king, still catching his breath on the floor. This clock was not measuring your reign. It was feeding it. Cale rose slowly, his voice edged with something close to fear. What did you do? Clara met his eyes without flinching. Nothing. I only touched the years your court stole before they reached you. Clara had grown up beneath the shadow of the Royal Clock Tower, in a small workshop where broken life clocks came to be repaired by hands no noble would ever shake. Debt wolves brought her clocks that ticked wrong, hearts and hourglasses, both running out of rhythm with the years they were meant to measure. She rarely charged more than bread, sometimes nothing at all, especially for children. She hated the tower most on nights the midnight bell rang, because somewhere in the lower district, someone always aged faster than they should have by morning. Her own father, Bram Voss, had once signed a time-debt contract to save her mother from fever, trading away what the paper called 5 harmless years. By morning, his hair had turned entirely white. His hands shook too badly to hold a cup. He forgot her birthday within the season. 3 months later he was gone, and the time ledger recorded his death as natural exhaustion. Clara had known, even as a child, that it was a lie dressed in official language. They did not take my father's years from the end of his life. They took them from every day he still owed me. She learned to fix clocks so she could learn where stolen years actually went. Cale Draven had not aged in 10 years, and the court called it proof of moon favor, discipline beyond ordinary wolves. He believed it too, in his own way, certain that his refusal to rest, to indulge, to slow down had somehow earned him this unnatural steadiness. He had signed renewal laws without hesitation, allowing time-debt contracts to remain legal sacrifice under crown law. He told himself the poor chose this freely. Time given to the crown returns as stability. Clara would answer him later, though not yet. Then why does stability always leave the poor older than the rich? For now, Cale only knew a clock girl from the lower district had knelt before his ceremonial clock and left him aging in front of his entire court. Her curse never explained itself with speeches. It showed itself in small, undeniable ways. A tampered life clock ticked backward instead of forward, gears grinding against the direction they were built to move. A forged, time-depth contract crumbled into golden dust the moment someone tried to prove its signature true. Whenever someone's years were secretly drained, their shadow on the nearest wall aged faster than the body casting it. Whenever Cale stood too close to stolen years, another strand of silver crept into his hair without warning. Whenever Malric lied aloud, the Royal Clock Tower's great bell struck the wrong hour, off by just enough to notice. Her curse did not control time. It remembered who had been forced to pay with it. The court called every time-depth contract a fair and willing trade. Elara knew better. A year signed away by hunger was not a gift. It was theft with a witness line. Grand Horologist Malric Thorne moved through the clock tower like a man who believed his own calculations were simply the shape of fairness. He did not think of himself as a thief. To him, coin was scarce among the poor, but time was the one resource everyone was born owning. The poor have little gold, but everyone is born rich in time. If they chose to trade a portion of it away to survive today, he considered that an honest transaction, nothing more. A hungry man who sells tomorrow has still made a choice today. He pressed Cale to continue the renewal rite without delay, unwilling to let one clock girl's meddling threaten a decade of careful arrangement. Cale did not agree outright, but he did not refuse either, not yet, still clinging to the idea that stability required this price. Cale pulled Elara from the hall that same evening, his patience thinning with every question the court whispered behind him. He told her that if he began visibly aging, nobles would panic, enemies would sense weakness, and a succession crisis could tear the kingdom apart within a season. Elara did not back down. A crown that needs stolen years to stand is already dying. He argued that people signed those contracts by their own will, no one forced them. Choice made under hunger has a clock at its throat. That night, for the first time in years, Cale removed his royal renewal ring before sleep, though he stopped short of demanding the system be dismantled entirely. Elara knew a boy named Tobin Hale, an apprentice bell ringer who had once wandered into the clock tower's basement and seen something he was never meant to see. Malric pouring stolen hourglasses into the royal renewal mechanism itself. Tobin could testify to exactly how the theft worked, link by link. Afraid Malric would drain the boy's years the moment his knowledge became known, Elara hid him inside her workshop. Believing silence would keep him safe until the danger passed, Malric found him anyway. Tobin was accused of being a time thief himself, and before Elara could stop it, he was clocked forward, losing 10 years of his life in a single terrible night, his testimony blurring along with his stolen youth. Cale, hearing that a witness boy had suddenly aged beyond recognition and could no longer clearly recall his own story, suspected Elara of staging the entire incident to manipulate the crown. When Elara finally found Tobin afterward, his young face lined now with years he had never lived. He did not thank her for trying to protect him. "You tried to save my years by hiding my name, but a hidden clock still counts down where no one hears it." Elara had no answer for that. She understood far too late that stolen time could not be protected by silence. It needed a public witness, a name spoken aloud, not a boy tucked quietly out of sight. Cale ordered a full review of the time ledger, more to disprove Elara's accusations than out of genuine doubt. The records were meticulous in every way that mattered to a court. Renewal rights, life clock reports, debt contracts filed and stamped, mortality projections, stability charts, noble longevity permits neatly catalogued. Nowhere in those pages was there any mention of pain, No record of fathers who forgot their daughters after signing away 5 harmless years. No count of children whose future decades were signed over by parents, desperate enough to trade what wasn't fully theirs to give. No mention of mothers who aged 20 years overnight simply to bury the ones they loved. Alara brought him to see the truth for himself. Clara Vance described watching her husband age a lifetime in a single morning after selling years meant to be harmless. Nessa Hale, still a child, had been signed into a future year's contract before she was old enough to understand what a signature meant. A servant woman, only 30 by any honest count, looked easily twice that age. Her body spent paying off a burial debt for a mother she'd barely had time to mourn. Cale stood among them, silent, the weight of every untouched record pressing down harder than any threat to his throne ever had. His court had recorded every year added to the crown. It had never recorded whose life had been shortened to make room for it. Lady Sorrel Draven arrived at court each season looking exactly as young and flawless as the year before, admired by nobles who whispered about her miraculous prime. She looked at Alara the way one looks at something that had wandered in from the wrong side of the city. Lower clocks should not touch royal time. Alara discovered, quietly, that Sorrel's family had been purchasing extra years from the time market for over a decade, years drawn from servant girls too poor to refuse the arrangement. When confronted, Sorrel denied it first, her pride bristling at the accusation. Then she found the age transfer record herself, proof that Malric had used noble longevity permits as cover to disguise the royal renewal drain running beneath it. I thought they bought me time because I was precious. I did not know they were buying it because they feared who I would become if I aged. Sorrel did not ask for forgiveness, and Alara did not offer any. But she placed the age transfer record into the growing chain of evidence herself, her hands shaking as she did it. Malric offered Cale a careful compromise once he sensed the danger closing in. Dismantling the time ledger now, he warned, could age Cale 10 years overnight, strip nobles of years they had already spent, collapse the debt economy entirely, and invite enemies to strike while the kingdom reeled. Worse, the years already taken from the dead could never be recovered, lost with no owner left to claim them. Instead, he proposed keeping the renewal system intact, softened only by minor reforms. Alara could receive a royal title, honored as a court-time witness, so long as she never spoke of where the crown's youth truly came from. Let the clock girl be honored. Let the crown remain young. Alara did not need long to answer him. A title that asks me to let stolen years keep ticking is only a prettier chain. Breaking Malric's careful mechanism required more than Alara's certainty alone. She began building what she called the returned years chain, piece after piece of testimony too heavy for any single voice to carry by itself. Her own curse marked its beginning. Tobin's bell tower testimony followed, fragile but present, despite everything taken from him. Her father's broken contract came next, then her mother's memory of the morning, his hair turned white, then Nessa's child contract, then the servant woman's burial debt clock, then finally Sorrel's age transfer record. A stolen year found by one clock girl could be called superstition. A stolen year named by witnesses became a life no ledger could keep spending. Alara returned to Tobin first, admitting plainly what she had done, the hiding, the silence, the protection that had cost him 10 years he would never get back. Tobin did not forgive her right away. His trust had been broken as surely as his stolen youth, but his testimony still stood, damaged and undeniable, another link in a chain heavier than any apology. When the final piece came together, the truth beneath it was worse than either of them had expected. Kale's royal life clock had never run on moon blessing at all. It had been secretly wired into the time ledger itself, drawing stolen years from debt wolves, with every renewal rite performed in his name. The system began 10 years earlier, after an assassination attempt nearly killed him, when the council decided the kingdom needed an alpha who could never again appear vulnerable. Time-debt contracts became the fuel that made that illusion possible. Your life did not stop aging. It learned to age through other people. Kale's voice, when it came, was rough with something closer to grief than anger. I did not steal every year, but I wore them on my skin and called it blessing. Malric moved quickly once he realized the chain was closing around him, rushing to complete one final Eternal Crown renewal before it could be stopped. If finished, Kale would remain locked in his prime permanently. Stolen years would become impossible to return. Tobin's remaining testimony would be erased, and Nessa's entire future would be consumed to finish the work. Kale wanted to smash the tower's central mechanism with his bare hands. Elara stopped him before he could. If the tower shattered by force, every unreturned year inside would scatter beyond recovery, lost to owners who might never reclaim even a fragment of what was taken. What they needed instead was a public return right, witnessed and undeniable before the whole court. Kale asked her quietly, before they entered the tower together, what she heard now whenever she stood near his clock. I hear everyone who grew old so you could stay young. The royal clock tower thrummed with the sound of 100 connected mechanisms as the Eternal Crown renewal began. Malric accused Elara openly of time witchcraft before the assembled court. Sorel's age transfer record glowed faintly on the table where it had been placed as evidence. Nessa's future years began visibly draining, the girl's small frame trembling as color left her cheeks. Kale's face grew younger before everyone's eyes, the silver vanishing from his hair as the court sighed in open relief. Elara opened the returned years chain before them all. Mara spoke her husband's name aloud, steady despite her grief. Tobin rang the tower bell at the wrong hour, on purpose, a signal no one could mistake. Nessa held up her child contract with trembling hands. The servant woman raised her burial debt clock high enough for the whole hall to see. Sorel presented her family's noble permit without flinching this time. Kale pressed his own blood against the royal life clock. But Malric moved faster than any of them expected. He locked the time ledger shut, forcing Tobin's stolen 10 years to burn as raw fuel for the mechanism. Nessa began aging rapidly in front of the entire court, years stripping away her childhood in seconds. Kale's hair darkened fully back to youth, his body strong, unmarked, eternal once more. For one dangerous moment, he felt exactly how easy it would be to let this power remain his. A year is only stolen if the owner could afford to keep it. Elara did not look away from him. Then tonight we stop calling poverty consent. For one unbearable breath, Elara could not tell whether the wrinkles spreading rapidly across her own hands belonged to her, to Tobin, to the debt wolves, or to the king whose youth had been fed by every year they never got to live. Kale had one choice left to make: eternal prime, powerful and unquestioned, or the true age that belonged to him, taken back from those who had paid for his illusion. I choose the age that belongs to me, not the youth that was taken for me. He tore the royal renewal ring from his finger and cast it onto the tower floor. The stolen years broke loose all at once. Some rushed back toward the living, restoring color to Nessa's cheeks, easing the ache in the servant woman's joints. Others rose as golden dust, forming names in the air for those who could never reclaim what had been spent. A quiet, glowing memorial drifting upward through the tower. Cale aged 10 years in a single breath. Silver flooding fully through his hair, new lines settling into his face. He did not look ruined. He looked, for the first time in a decade, entirely human. The central clock mechanism cracked from top to bottom, and Malric's perfect machine ground to a permanent halt. Guards moved in to restrain him before he could reach for the broken ledger again. When the tower fell silent, Cale did not claim that Malric alone was responsible for what had happened. He stood before the cracked royal clock, silver-haired, weary, undeniably real. I did not steal every year, but I wore them on my skin and called it blessing. He spoke the names aloud. One by one, Bram Voss, Tobin Hale, Nessa Hale, the servant woman who had aged decades for a debt that was never fully hers. Every debt wolf whose years had quietly fed a crown that called itself eternal. He abolished forced, time-debted contracts within the hour. He banned any future signing away of a child's years, without exception. He ordered every noble longevity permit reviewed under public witness. He restored years wherever restoration was still possible, and named the dead whose years could never be returned, so their loss would not vanish unrecorded. He stripped Malric of his title and authority entirely and had him removed from the tower in chains. He placed the lower district's clockworkers under crown protection for the first time in the kingdom's history. And when advisors suggested naming Alara his personal royal timekeeper, he refused, just as firmly as he refused every other attempt to make her service permanent and convenient. Alara did not forgive on behalf of anyone she had failed to protect, and she made certain the court understood that forgiveness was not hers to distribute for them. The kingdom needed more than one king's honesty, so Cale signed the returned year's covenant before the full court. 5 conditions carved into law where quiet theft had once ruled unquestioned. No child's future years could ever again be sold, signed away, or transferred by anyone else's hand. Poverty debt could never again be paid with lifespan in any form. Every royal renewal right would have to disclose its true source and consent from that day forward. Testimony from lower clockworkers would carry full legal weight in any court proceeding, and every noble longevity permit was suspended pending full and public review. No crown shall call itself eternal by spending the years of the poor. Alara was named Keeper of Stolen Years, not because Cale chose her, and not because she had restored his life clock to its proper rhythm. The kingdom needed someone who would always ask whose tomorrow had quietly become someone else's currency. Weeks later, Cale found her in the quiet of an old clock garden, away from court, away from ceremony, away from every renewal ring that had once defined him. What do I look like now? Alara studied the silver threading fully through his hair. Older. He nodded slowly, as if he had expected exactly that answer. And weaker? More honest. He did not reach for her. He did not call her his Luna or speak of bonds neither of them had chosen. I will not make you the hand that keeps my time still. Good. I am not a clock for a king. A month later, the royal clock tower reopened as the returned year's hall. Its mechanisms reviewed openly under the care of witnesses who would never again look away. Nessa's future years were partially restored, her childhood returning to her in slow, careful pieces. Tobin never recovered the 10 years stolen from him in a single night. But his name and his testimony were recorded correctly at last, permanent where they had once been erased. Mara placed her husband's broken contract inside the hall herself, laying it down like something finally allowed to rest. Sorel did not become Luna, but she let a single true streak of silver show in her hair for the first time in her life and did not hide it. Cale appeared before the court each morning now, his aging face entirely uncovered, entirely his own. Elara sat at the witness bench inside the returned years hall, watching over what remained. A small child approached her one afternoon, uncertain, asking whether losing time meant a person simply disappeared. No, but no one should be allowed to take your tomorrow and call it theirs. The court had once laughed at the clock girl because her hands touched broken things. But under Elara's watch, Draven Kingdom learned that time was not gold, tax, debt, or royal medicine. It was life, and no crown, no contract, no tower had the right to make the poor grow old so the powerful could remain young.